Good evening, and apologies for our delay. We're trying to move from one meeting to the next, and here we are. So this is the study session for June 24th, 2024. Mr. City Manager, I have the stated legislative update. Do you have any comments to get us ready to go on this, and away we go?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. This evening, we have a representative from the city's lobbying firm, John Barget and Associates. We are really pleased and privileged to be joined by Chris Ropey, who works with that firm. He is here to give us an update on this past legislative session and how the city fared in general. So at this point, I'd be happy to turn it over to Mr. Ropey.
Thank you, Zach. Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Perfect. Mr. Mayor, it's always great to see you, and it's always great to be in the hometown of President Truman. My name is Chris Ropey. I am one of the lobbyists with John Barget and Associates, who has the privilege and honor to represent the City of Independence down in Jefferson City, inside the Capitol. It's good to see some familiar faces that I've got to visit with and got to know, and see some new ones, and look forward to working with everybody. Zach and John in particular, we have a really good line of communication, and I feel like I want to thank them publicly for all they do to make sure we know what issues are of importance and what we need to be working on, and they get us very quick answers, so that way we can be focusing on the issues that are of importance. And as many of you know, with government, things move rapidly at a lot of times and also very slowly at times, but it's nice to have a client who does such a good job of communicating, and that really is the key to a successful relationship, which means success for the city of Independence. We do bi-weekly calls. We go over all the bills that are filed, and try to find ones that look like will be of importance because they're either bad or they're good, and figure out what that looks like, and take direction from there on what issues we work on and want to go engage on behalf of the city. And they're always a phone call and a text message away, and like I said, just very good at getting information and answers to us on things we're working on. No legislative session is identical, and anytime you say you think you've seen it all, something comes up and happens that you definitely have not seen before. This session in particular was the most bizarre that I've ever been a part of. And the mayor had the privilege to serve in Jefferson City, or maybe not the privilege, I don't know, depending on how you look at things from time to time. But it was definitely one that was very, very unique, and there's a lot of reasons that went into that. It seemed like they went months without getting anything done, and just bickering and infighting, and everybody seemed to be running for a statewide office, or representatives running for Senate, and it just led to not a lot of cooperation. As you are aware, Republicans strongly control the majorities in both the House and the Senate, and they didn't get along on anything with that you've seen in the press, I'm sure, with all of the different factions that exist, and the Democrats, for the most part, just kind of sat back and watched the infighting happen with Republicans, and did the hard work in the Democrats' minds of stopping and slowing down and killing all the bad bills that existed, and they really just didn't get a whole lot done. If you look overall at things, they passed 46 total bills, of which 18 of them were appropriation bills, which those are constitutionally mandated. That's the one thing they have to do in Jeff City during the legislative session. And there were 28 what I would call regular policy bills that made it across the finish line. You look at the next steps in that process, and I'll talk about some of those bills that I know are of interest, of ones that didn't pass and ones that did pass. Specifically on the budget, June 30th is the deadline for when the governor will announce his decisions. He proposes the budget, then the legislature makes changes to it, then sends those final changes to the governor for his decision making on items that he wants to keep or remove, and that is due at the end of the fiscal year, which is the end of this month. And there will be a lot of broken hearts when he comes out with his announcements on projects or other items in the budget that he will choose not to fund. The rumor going around Jeff City in political circles is that if an item wasn't in his recommendations back in January when he released his state budget, that there's a good chance that he's going to line item veto that specific project or item. And the legislature did add a lot of different projects. And one of those I'll talk about here in a second as well that I know is important to many of you with the drop-in shelter. If you look at the policy pieces of legislation, he has until July 14th to make decisions on those. And that's different than the budget bills, where he can't pick and choose different provisions or sections within those bills. It's a take it or leave it. It's either the whole bill or none of it. I'd say if you look at the topics of bills that were filed, education and healthcare bills usually are the most popular. And then I'd say probably if you look by volume, the third most popular topic is legislation that gets in the middle of political subdivisions and the state trying to tell you what to do. So a lot of, and some of them are helpful. I'd say 95%, and you would probably all consider not helpful and say, leave us alone, let us do what's best for our city and make those decisions. Getting into specifically some of the issues that we worked on, going back to the drop-in shelter and that going here and getting some of that money to help with that. We were very blessed to get $500,000 put in the budget in the House as that House Bill 2011, which is the Department of Health and Social Services budget, made it out of the House, which is a good thing, as it has appeared to be more fiscally conservative than the Senate, and so we knew we were in a good position where that probably was going to be the low point. Got the Senate to add another $500,000 to it, so we were up to $1 million in funding to help with that project. And then in the back and forth, in the very strange legislative session that occurred, the final number, as they went with a lower number overall in the budget, it was reduced to the House amount of $500,000, which I know will still have a tremendous impact in getting that project going and taking the next steps in that project. We will know here in the next 14 days or whatever it is, what the governor will decide to do with that, and we will keep everybody posted once we know what his final decision is on that, as well as the $53 billion other dollars that are in the budget that he is trying to deal with. Another issue of importance, and specifically if you look at it from law enforcement perspective and community safety perspective, is Blair's Law finally got done, which I know for a lot of our larger cities in the state and the connection to how that started of firearm and firing that in municipality and increasing some crimes for that finally made it across the finish line as a part of a larger criminal justice bill. And like I said, we will know on July 14th if the governor will sign or veto that bill. I think there's a good, unless they find something technically wrong with it. A lot of those provisions passed in previous sessions, and they fixed the issue that caused the veto in the past, and I do feel good about him signing that piece of legislation. They also passed an increase in historical tax credits to incentivize that outside of what we would, traditionally consider your urban core, to try to promote that in more suburban and more rural areas of our state, taking that from a 25% match to a 35% match in what you can be reimbursed for, and trying to get the ball rolling on some of those historic programs and some of those historic buildings away from the urban areas where that has been the main focus since the program has been in existence. There was House Bill 2062 this year that passed that had several components to it that dealt with what I would call local government type issues. And this is mostly focused on what you have read and seen in Kansas City with a moratorium on being able to evict people where that was prohibited. There was a big push by Republicans to get that passed this session, where a city couldn't keep a landlord from doing that. So just to make everybody aware that bill did pass, that has those changes in there, which would limit you. And if you had a policy or ever wanted to do something on that, that's what the state law will now be on that if that's signed into legislation. Another piece of that legislation that I know is of interest to a lot of our larger municipalities around the state is a prohibition on requiring EV stations in certain private businesses or other entities or organizations that would be within your city. There was a big push for a total prohibition that would limit you and hinder your ability. And through legislative negotiations, compromises, and people trying to take what I consider and say half a bite of the apple and not get greedy and try to take the whole thing, the legislation got watered down where you could only limit it to churches and non-for-profits. So a municipality could not force a non-for-profit or a church to put in an EV charging station in their parking lots. You still will have the right, if you would choose to ever go down that path, to be able to pursue that for any other entity or organization or landowner, commercial property or business, if that's what you wanted to do for your city. There's a lot of, like I said, bad legislation filed and pushed very hard this session. The big thing that you see from Republicans is to cut taxes and cut taxes, and that's obviously a political issue that wants to get talked about, but a lot of times people forget and don't want to talk about what does that mean for services if you don't have the revenue to provide for your communities. There has been a push the last several years to cut the sales tax on groceries and food. And it's millions and millions and millions of dollars for municipalities around the state. And we fortunately were able to work with a lot of other municipalities that had lobbyists helping their interest in the Capitol to stop that from advancing forward and passing this past session, and what that would have meant in the services, whether it's firefighters or police officers that you would have had to taken off the streets and be available with the amount of cuts that would have had to have been made for that. Another bill I want to bring to your all's attention that was in our report at the end of the session, for any political subdivision, just to be aware of this, House Bill 2111 gives some new powers to the state auditor as far as the process and how he can go in and audit political subdivisions, where before, I'm just not that familiar with it, but there are steps where you could have a citizen petition, folks within government could request that audit. This would essentially allow the auditor to unilaterally go do that in certain circumstances without that concerns being brought to him or his office, where he would be able to go do some things now that he, if this is signed into law, that he currently can't do. There's an effort to always change our community improvement district process in those elections, or your TDDs and how those elections work. And there was a big push by Republicans this session to change that, where you had to pass those to form one or to make changes to those on a citywide vote, and not just the area that's affected by it. And I think that would create a lot of challenges. A lot of municipalities spoke up against those. That way you all could keep your flexibility to be able to go and do the things you need to do to develop your communities and parts of your communities that are in most need of those types of tools that state law allows for. I saw the chief over here earlier and said hi. Failure to appear, and what that means for law enforcement, I know has always been a big deal in this region and in this area. And the chief came down and did a great job testifying. There was a lot of folks from St. Louis from law enforcement who came and testified at the committee hearing. Unfortunately, there's a lot of resistance to giving law enforcement those tools that they have had previously to be able to go and hold people accountable, so that way that you can keep things more safe in your communities. And that's something that I hope you all will pursue next year as you develop your legislative agenda. But that was something that I know was important and had a great hearing and steps in the process. Just there's a lot of resistance from folks from some of the stuff that happened in St. Louis in the past, and it's one of those unintended consequences that has affected the rest of the state. There was some other legislation that dealt with limiting drone usage for law enforcement, which was a big deal. If you look and read between the lines of what brought this around, that wants to limit local law enforcement's ability to use drones to protect the public. And it has to do with competition from the drone manufacturers and the technology, where they wanted to block out somebody and say you could only use these certain ones. And I think a lot of infrastructure in those areas have been paid for by law enforcement and by by police around the state, where it would have been a big cost to have to go and make changes that were unnecessary, and simply government trying to intervene and picking and choosing what you could or couldn't use. And law enforcement as a whole was very against the legislation, that we were happy to be able to go help fight against and get that blocked. The catalytic converter issue, which those thefts are happening everywhere. I know that's important, again, from a public safety perspective. What I would call, if this really exists, the scrap special interests in there, not wanting to have a database and keep track of those so they can get crime down with what happens as people are stealing those from vehicles, and what that does for areas of town and communities around the state. That will be a big issue again next year, and it always gets held up by one or two senators who have some pretty big heavy hitters in the scrap industry in their districts that they are opposing and fighting that legislation. I know utility issues are always a big deal, as you have your own utility here. One of the issues that we tried to fight and stop this year and just were unsuccessful was on the streaming services and not being able to tax those. Talked to, obviously, our local delegation as well as other legislators about that legislation, and a lot of them just truly felt that if they voted against that bill, it was them raising taxes on their constituents and saying we're going to now allow taxing of those streaming services, and we unfortunately were not able to convince enough people to be against that to stop that from happening. We did successfully stop a utility relocation policy that was being pushed that would have handcuffed you and would have forced your utilities to do things and not be recompensated for those costs that went into that, and are fortunate to be able to stop that and save those costs. And I'll answer any questions on other bills that I didn't just mention there, or if anyone has questions beyond that, and a few other things to wrap up with. As you all know, it's a big election year, very big election year. Due to a lot of things, including redistricting that has occurred and what these legislative districts look like, there aren't a lot of competitive general elections that exist and for state legislative seats anymore. So a lot of these races around the state and the direction that the legislature is going to go will be decided here in the next 6 weeks with the August primary. There are a handful of competitive general election races, which one of them will be right here to see who replaces Senator Razor, which I know Senator Rizzo, who you all are very familiar with. We will miss Senator Rizzo very much. He was a great advocate for the city of Independence and was great to work with all these years to help protect and fight for your interests, and he did a great job of stopping a lot of bad stuff and helping stop a lot of bad stuff that was out there being pushed. The most attention gets paid to probably this governor's primary. The latest polling I've seen and heard is it's neck and neck between Lieutenant Governor Kehoe and Secretary of State Ashcroft. 6 weeks to go. That's an eternity. A lot of things could happen, and we'll see how that all shakes out. And everybody has an opinion about which one of those two gentlemen they like better, and how that would work for and look like for the policies that come out of their offices. And I'll let you decide what you prefer, but that is out there and will be talked about a lot over the next 6 weeks. We're lucky for this area to have the majority floor leader, soon to be speaker, who I know is a really good friend of your mayor's here, in John Patterson, who butts right up against the city of Independence with his district, and has been a tremendous help for interest to you all as well. And it'll be nice to have him as the speaker going into the next 2 legislative sessions, to be able to rely on him and talk to him about issues of importance and figuring out what we can do to help him and what he can do to help do things that are good for the state in that role and for this area and this region. I know it's always top of mind for him. We have a new floor leader in the House that will take his spot. It's a young man by the name of Alex Riley, who is an attorney from Springfield, who will be the next floor leader for 2 years, will serve in that role. And in the Senate, Senator Rizzo was the minority leader. There'll be a new minority leader with him being termed out of office, and there will be a new president pro tem that is likely to be Senator Cindy O'Laughlin, who is the current floor leader in the Senate, and she will assume the role of President Pro Tem if she is elected to that by her colleagues, which everyone expects her to be. There will be a race for the floor leader's position going into the next two-year cycle for that. And that's important because they dictate what bills come up and don't come up and which ones get a lot of time and don't get much time, which sets the policy for the whole state. And so that's why those roles, those legislative leadership roles, are very important. The last policy issue I'll talk about is your ability to put your tourism tax on the ballot to make some changes that you want to make for your community center to help fund some of those operating costs. I know we got brought in I think late January, early February, so we missed the ability to have that legislation pre-filed December 1st. Got it real close on several bills to the finish line, and there were several other cities trying to do something similar for their communities. None of them made it across the finish line because of the dysfunction, but if you do make that a priority again next year, I know we have 2 years to get it done before I think the timing of when you will need it. I feel good about our chances if we can get it pre-filed and work with folks to move it along as quick as possible and get that done for you so you can have that tool at least to send to your voters if you choose to. I am going to stop talking now and happy to answer any questions or get into any other details of any other bills that I did or didn't mention.
Anyone other questions? Please proceed.
Chris, thank you. You've been a great host when we come to Jefferson City and a great advocate for independence, and we know you clearly love our president, and it's been a joy to work with you, so thank you.
Thank you for your kind words. We really are privileged and honored to represent the city.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chris, for all the work you're doing down there. It's not always the stuff that we need to get pushed across the finish line. It's the stuff that we need to stop before it gets to the finish line, and one of those is the CID. We're getting ready to put a bow on one on the 24 highway. In fact, the votes need to be in by tomorrow. And those are the tools that have been very successful helping independence, and specifically Western Independence, to help develop itself and kind of get things moving over there. So when they get in, when Jeff City doesn't realize the impact that those changes can make drastically for certain parts of our city that needs those different tools. So thank you for keep working on that.
Yeah, you bet. And I really do think as those types of changes will continue to be pursued by legislators who think they're being abused in places, and maybe they are in their communities. I can't speak to that for sure, but I know it has been a really good tool here, and we certainly don't want the legislature to take away your ability to do what you need to do for your community. And with Representative Patterson becoming speaker, who's going to be an advocate for this area and this region, love to work with him to make sure that no changes or the right changes occur, so you still have that flexibility. And either any of the candidates that I know personally that are running for state senate, I think would do the same thing and really stand up and fight for your interests, which are going to be important to have on the Senate side. Sure. As well.
Thanks. Anyone else? I'll be very brief on this. This is a thorn. I asked too many questions the last time we had a study session. Any chances of Senate Bill 5 being modified in favor of the cities?
Are you talking about the old Senate Bill 5 from
right, and just
the now U.S. Senator Schmidt when he was state that issue? You know, that has been a very fascinating political issue to see, where you know, traditionally you see a legislator who you would think we're going to be tough on crime and we're going to give law enforcement tools, and they really don't see that issue that way anymore. And I think it's a boomerang where it went way out here, and I think it's coming back. I know the chief in that hearing, I mean, there was great feedback from those committee members. I just think you have a handful of senators who are going to be just resistant to it because they still see it as the exact issue that they talked about, where it's not a public safety or a law enforcement issue that they're worried about, but that it's putting people in jail who can't afford it, and then they can't make it to work, and it's being abused to help cities collect taxes, or they call it taxes, and you broke the law. Sure. You broke the law. So it's gonna be tough. I think, I don't know that you'll get all of it ever back, but I think like the failure to appear part and some of the things around the edges, I do think, depending how these primaries go, could tell what that might look like, and could have a better chance if some of those go the right way.
And we'll talk offline. I appreciate that. Anyone else, other questions? But I just appreciate you every time I go to Jeff City or I make a phone call, you always get back. And I know you've been a really strong advocate. You've helped us out. So I can't say thank you enough. And please pass on my hello to John. He does a great job. The two of you do a great job. So I just can't say thank you enough. Anyone else?
And he told me to say hello. He is actually doing the same thing I'm doing to our community college association, which we have the joy to represent, which I know with Metro here and having a few of campuses here, that's important to your community as well. So,
Perfect. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank
Mr.
you all.
City Manager, anything else left on that topic?
Nothing, sir. Thank you.
All right, perfect. That'll bring us up to the update for the Chamber of Commerce. Mr. City Manager, do you have anything you want to frame that?
Sure, I'll do that while our next speaker starts to come up. So as the council may recall, back in November 2022, you approved a new contractual agreement with the Chamber of Commerce, what was officially termed the Independence Economic Development Partnership, to help represent the city in our economic development dealings. Tonight, we are going to hear a presentation from representatives of the Chamber of Commerce about the progress to date with that partnership. And to get us started, I will turn it over to Chairman of the Board, Yvonne Hall.
Sorry. Been thoroughly impressed by the hard work of the chamber, the volunteers, the chamber staff, the passion, just to promote independence and economic development in Independence. By the end of the year, my second half will run fast, and I'm sure I'll be even prouder of the great works of the chamber, in particular Jody Krantz. I wanted to let you know that Jody isn't here tonight. She is suffering a pretty serious medical condition, and any prayers and thoughts you have, we would sure appreciate it for Jody at this time. Tonight, I'd like to just kind of give an overview of tonight's presentation. We will be or overview of the economic development activity that we've had this year. We'll give you a project up report of the partnerships of the strategic plan. We'll also overview of key initiative or key performance indicators and economic development related data. So just a brief history again, as Mr. Walker mentioned, we did enter into a contract with the City Council back in December of 2022 for the Partnership for Economic Development. It's a 2-year term with an option for extension. It is operating as a public-private partnership under the Chamber's umbrella. The Economic Development Division of the Chamber is led by Ron Finke, and he serves as IEDP Chair of the Board. Advisory Board is made up of 20 members, and they do meet quarterly. And we did update our strategic plan, which was adopted in April of 2023. So at this point, I would like to turn the program over to Tom Lesnick, who is President and CEO of the Chamber.
Thank you, Yvonne, and good evening, Mayor and members of the Council. It's a pleasure to speak to you tonight and talk about our progress on our economic development program. As was mentioned, 18 months ago, we started our contract with the city, contract for services. We provided you and our private sector partners with a monthly update. I hope you've enjoyed that and gotten information from that. And feel free to share that. We send it out to elected officials and our stakeholders to keep them updated, but it's also to be shared with the community. Much of the information is not confidential, it's general information, so I hope you find that valuable. You've probably seen some of the drone videos we've done to kind of promote some of the development projects. Feel free to share that social media. The last video we did, I think, had over 500 views, so it's a very effective marketing tool for us. I'm going to get into some detail on some various things. If I don't jump back too many slides. First of all, I'm going to talk about project activity. First of all, I'll start with industrial. Obviously, many of you know the first two North Point buildings are out of the ground and are now being marketed. They're bookend buildings, or what we refer to bookend buildings, 286,000 square foot each. We've had a number of prospects who have looked at those buildings. Wiedenhammer, which will be the first tenant in one of the buildings, they're just starting their build out now to occupy the building late this summer and early this fall. We've been working with the Kansas City Area Development Council and the Missouri Partnership to look at external leads that could come to our community. And I've been doing economic development independence off and on for 17 years or so, and this is an exciting time for industrial development. You'll see in some of our data later on, we really didn't have industrial space to market whatsoever in this community. And it's nothing more frustrating for an economic developer than to have a prospect come to your door and say, hey, you know, we're looking for space, and we just have to say, sorry, there's no room at the inn. So that's one of our big challenges. But the start of the North Point project and the Eastgate Commerce Center is an incredible tool for us to attract jobs and capital investment to our community. On the retail side a little bit, we're really continuing to see a shift in retail, and it started with online websites like Amazon and various ones like that. The pandemic kind of accelerated that process, and even today we still see people who find the convenience of shopping from home to be something they like to do. And it's even gotten to a point now where they can buy clothing, which we thought was kind of immune from online, but when you can buy clothing or buy shoes and turn around and send it back, usually at no cost, it's had an impact on some of our brick and mortar retailers. Certainly the passage of the use tax helped us from I think from a financial standpoint in terms of being able to capture some of those the revenues for city government services. But you know, the retail sector is our largest independence. It employs over 15,000 people, and retail is obviously very important. The shift we're seeing in retail is that most retail now is experiential. That means people want to have an experience when they go somewhere. They're not going there just to shop, they're going there to experience something. And so we're seeing trends like that more and more. Retailers are getting away from having a lot of inventory in the retail store. They're putting that into warehouses, which is cheaper space. And they can do drop ship, same day shipping in many cases. And so that's starting to change. The retail footprint is becoming smaller as retailers become more showrooms than they do places where you can actually take home items. Final area I'll kind of hit on a little bit is housing, and we've certainly seen a good trend in housing. Every community in the country doesn't have enough inventory of housing, and we're not any different, but we have seen a little bit of a shift in that. So we obviously have some multifamily projects that have come along here in the last year, and I'll talk about those and some of the data points. But it is one of the most important things. Obviously, when somebody comes into the community, they're looking at places for not only the CEO, but the people who sweep floors. And so having a wide, diverse range of housing is pretty important. That single-family housing is still in great demand. There's a project at R.D. Mize. They'll provide some single-family housing. Newtown has done well, and it continues to build out next phases. And I think really with the announcement of North Point in the Valley, we saw a pretty dynamic change and interest by housing developers who previously wouldn't look at independence, and now they are. One of the things we are working on, and it actually came out of a study session a few weeks ago, was a business license feedback survey to ask our businesses who are pulling new business licenses how the experience was. How were they? Was the ease of use good? Was the process good? And we just sent out the first survey about 10 days ago. We'll continue to compile that data as it comes in and share that with city staff as well as council. But I think in everything we do, we want to make sure the process is simple and easy and convenient for any business, especially a new business that's coming into the community. And then finally, we work very closely with the Innovation Center. Jody Krantz continues to serve on the board as a board member. One of the things with the incubator that when we started it in 2010, we really wanted to accomplish was to keep those businesses here in the community. We're helping them grow and get started, but in many cases, in some cases, because of lack of space, we weren't able to retain those. And so Jody's worked very closely with many of them. I know Natalie Pickens is in the audience back here. She was helped by Jody to find a location up on the square. We worked very closely with Novus Power to find an existing building down in the valley, and they have become a permanent business here in the community in their own space. 3 areas I'll talk about in terms of our strategic plan implementation. We had not done a strategic plan since 2004 with economic development, so we were long overdue. A lot of things had changed certainly in those 19 years. One of the first things was website. We were essentially starting new. Although we kind of took over the role of the former Economic Development Council, we needed a brand new website. It needed to be updated anyway, and that is the first place that businesses go. Sometimes we don't get the phone call until after they've done their research. They go to our website and they look at demographic information. They're looking at commercial real estate availability. They're looking at incentives. They're doing their homework before they ever pick up the phone and talk to us. And so indepthpartnership.biz is the website. It's a subsection of the Chamber website, has a lot of activity, a lot of good information if you haven't checked it out. Workforce development is another big area that we were a little bit short on. Most people don't realize we have about 20 organizations in our community that are involved with workforce development in some way, shape, or form. But what they have never done is come together and have that communication of how do we all work together for a common goal. And so in May, we had our first meeting of the Workforce Development Committee. All 20 organizations came together, talked about what they do, and it was amazing to see that many of them were not aware others even existed. But our goal ultimately is to enhance the workforce, because with 5,000 jobs coming into Valley, along with all the jobs that we need throughout the community, workforce is usually the defining issue in many cases when companies make decisions on where they go. And then the final thing is we created a jobs board. That was one of the things that was lacking a little bit. There's a lot of jobs, Indeed, ZipRecruiter, a bunch of them out there, but they're sometimes difficult to use, cumbersome, and in many cases expensive. So we created indepthjobs.com. It's a free database system available to any businesses. We launched it about a month ago. Already have several new jobs on there. And the nice thing about the database system that most systems kind of miss is we have the opportunity not only to allow employers to post jobs, but for residents to post resumes, so employers can actually search for them instead of them searching for employers. So I invite you to check that out. So I'm going to get into a little bit about economic data. I think a lot of economic developers, and I'm guilty as any of them over the years, sometimes we want to report on new jobs and capital investment. And as I've always kind of pointed out, economic development groups don't create jobs and we don't make capital investment. So what we want to do is we want to kind of monitor statistics. What is the economics of what's happening in our community? How does it translate into various things? So I'm going to kind of share with you things about commercial property vacancy, business license that have been issued, building permits, and employment levels. So this is a graph looking at commercial vacancy and independence, and we're comparing quarter versus quarter. First quarter of last year, first quarter of this year. I think the one thing that stands out quite a bit is the industrial vacancy, going from 1.1% to 6.1%, and that is solely because of the North Point buildings. It shows you we've always been under 3% on industrial vacancy. There's literally no industrial space that was available, and most of it that was very old and outdated and not very modern. So now we have space to market. 6.1% is not a bad thing. Honestly, I'd like to have about 10%, to tell you the truth. It gives us something to sell. On the retail side, you can see the numbers there. We're at 10.7 in 2023. We've dropped a little bit. That's a good sign. Our retail space is filling up. On the office side, we're actually lower on those numbers than we have been in years past. We were upwards of 17, 18% back in 2016, 2017. What kind of changed when you saw the numbers go from 7.6 to 8.5%? It's pretty marginal. We don't have much of an office market, so a 1% change really isn't much of anything in that market. There's the one area that I think we talk about multifamily housing and occupancy, and this is something that council I know discussed a lot over the last several months. In fact, I think there was even a moratorium for a short period of time while you did a housing study to understand what is the need that's out there. Well, we looked at data from first quarter of last year. We were at right now 93.9% occupancy. first quarter of this year, we've only dropped by 1%. So that tells you with over 700 units that came online, multifamily units during the last year, the demand was certainly there. And we do have the Adirondacks over by Bass Pro that's coming online here this summer. We expect probably North Point will start construction on their project sometime later this year. There's still demand there. Nationally, if you can stay above that 80% range in terms of occupancy, demand is there. And then kind of looking at employment a little bit, employment has been fairly stable for the most part. I looked at the average kind of going pre-pandemic, 2018 through 2022, we were about 54.4. Here in the last couple of years, we've been around the 56,000 level generally, not a whole lot of change. I think we'll see that start to shift a little bit with some of the jobs related to the North Point project. And then on unemployment, you can see where we were. We were, 5%, and now we're in the middle threes. And so that's a fairly tight labor market when you're at 3%, especially in independents. And then building permits, you can see where we were for 2023 totals, about 40 million. Where we are currently this year compared to the same period last year, we're slightly ahead. We're kind of on trend for where we were in 2023. The one thing that could change all that is if North Point actually files a building permit. That's probably a $30+ million project that'll bump that number on beyond 2023 totals. And then on the commercial side, that's probably the most impressive one. If you look at the total from last year, 57.3 million already this year, 5 months into the year, we're at 56 million on commercial valuation for building permits. The big driver of that is $18 million for the medical center emergency care hospital that CenterPoint's doing at 23rd and Lee Summit Road. But there's a lot of big projects still out there, and so I think that'll be a number that will continue to grow. And wouldn't surprise me if we hit 100 million this year. Would not surprise me at all. So that's my presentation. I'm glad to take any questions.
Anyone, any questions? Please proceed.
Sure. Tom, thanks so much for being here and for sharing in this report. Certainly, thoughts and prayers go out to Jody and her family and all of you who work with her because that's important. Appreciate the information. Appreciate the comparisons. I guess one of the thoughts that comes to my mind is, not that money's never not an option, not an obstacle. But if you had more resources, what would you do with them to help improve our economic development in Independence? If it wasn't an issue,
Probably, we would probably be more involved with doing some consultant trips with KCADC. They do about 4 or 5 each during the course of the year. They were just in Los Angeles here, meeting with consultants in Los Angeles. A lot of times I think consultants, they know about Kansas City, they may not know about Independence. And so I think just from a marketing standpoint, being able to be in front of those consultants and sharing our story is the biggest thing. And probably the one limitation, we don't have a lot of money within a travel budget to do things like that. And things like that are fairly expensive.
Gotcha. That's helpful. The other thing that I'm anxious to see is the results of the survey. I think that's really, an important area for us as a city to focus our energy on, to make that process of, when somebody decides they want to build or improve a facility here and bring that through the process. I think we need to make it as seamless and easy as possible within the parameters that that we're dealing with. So, so I'm anxious to see that.
I think you've all heard maybe the complaint of, well, the process is difficult or the process is hard. I've also heard people say, if they've worked in numerous cities, the process in Independence is very easy. So this will give us some feedback on, if there are things we can make better, then, certainly we can work on improving those. But it's just nice to know the feedback of, and many of, some of these, as we looked at the survey, some of these are new startup businesses that have never done an application before. Some of them, have locations across the country and they're familiar with it. And I'm curious as we extrapolate the data, how that will look compared to the two.
right. Because I've heard both stories as well.
Yep.
And so I'm really anxious to see, some statistically relevant,
Yep.
results. So,
Look forward to sharing that.
all right, thank you.
Anyone else other for questions? Anybody else? Okay. Well, thank you very much. And again, our thoughts and prayers for Jody and her family and her friends. And
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming in today.
I will share
Thank
that
you
with
very
them.
much.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you. All right, Mr. City Manager, sounds like we're going to talk about the square.
Yes, sir.
How would you like to tee that up?
Well, I will, in the interest of time, I know many members of the city's master development team that have been working on this project are here. That is a cross-functional team, so I'm not quite sure which of them is Bill. Okay, Bill Crandall from Copac and Brooks is going to kick this off for us.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Zach, Mr. Mayor, and members of the council. I'm Bill Crandall with Copac and Brooks, and we're here tonight to give you an update on the master plan. And as if you may recall that we talked about kind of a three-legged stool where we would have a physical master plan, which will be the body of our presentation today. But then that would be married with a master business plan, which is how are we going to actually induce investment into our district, as well as sort of branding and things like that. So kind of the business strategy. And third was the master economic plan, and we have members of our team here to talk about that, and we'll get into more detail. But we do, as city manager mentioned, we do have a interdisciplinary team. So Copac and Brooks, Bill Crandall, my associate Brett Gross is here helping me tonight, and he'll be giving the body of our presentation. But joining our team was Olson Associates in their Olson studio, their planning department. So Darren Varn will be here with that. And then Steve Nicholas is here with Michael Short, who'll be leading the presentation to talk about bonding strategies and things like that. So really so those are sort of the three big chunks of information we want to convey tonight. This is, I would say, kind of maybe the 50-yard line where we've got our master plan in place. We're excited to present it to you. It's had a lot of stakeholder involvement, a lot of support from staff, but that to me is just the end of the first half, and we want to really begin the second half by going out and really getting new investment into the community. So with that, I'll turn it over to Darren, who I believe will be given the update on the master plan, and then we're here to answer questions too. So please ask if you feel free to.
I think we went through that part. So thank you very much for being here. This is an exciting night for us to come in here and talk to you about our progress and where we are. We've already talked to quite a few of you and a lot of stakeholders along the way. So a lot of this is vetted out according to really what we're being told and what we're trying to listen to, and then trying to put it down on paper so it's your vision. So as Bill said, we're going to go through the master plan, the vision, the bonding, and then next steps at the end as we go through and walk through the presentation. I think you've all got a little packet. It's not little, it's pretty big. So hopefully you can go slide by slide through there and fish your way around it through it. Doesn't seem like 5 months ago or so that some of us were together going through this on a cold, kind of snowy day, looking at all these things, and then coming up with some initial concepts with everybody, then vetting that out and kind of listening the next day. So it was a 2 or 3 kind of day event doing that. And that eventually we went back, did some work, brought it back to the group, and then went out to the public, and we had another little event that night. So a lot of little, you can see the little Post-its that we like to use all over the drawings and getting those ideas down. So really, it's all about the community more than it is us. We feel like we're scribes, and if we've done our job at the end, it'll feel like we just kind of helped you get there, but it's your plan. So I might jump back and let Brett talk about this one. Brett, if you want to go in first of how we're doing that.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. So we were kind of looking at the square, and it's 150 parcels or so, and we were kind of like, where do we start? And we had this idea of kind of breaking it down into what we see as opportunities for redevelopment right now, and that's the green. What we see as maybe opportunities in the future that might come up, and those are in yellow. And then something that we're not really considering, making any changes to other than, potential facade improvements or something like that, is in the red, and then the blue as repurposing. Those are the main items there. And it really stuck out to us. The green items were the items that are mostly city or county controlled, and areas that some of them that don't have a lot of economic value for the city, and looking at changing those first. Like Lot L, for example, if you can see that, is on the southern edge. And it's a big surface lot. Half of it's owned by the county, half of it's owned by the city. There's a surplus of parking down there, so there's no need for that. And that would be a great opportunity for something like a multifamily development to come into. So that's kind of where this idea started. We call it the stoplight plan, but more formally the redevelopment opportunity plan. And we think it kind of showcases how much opportunity there is all around the square, but mainly on the east side, where the municipal buildings are, where we are right now, and then a few other parcels. Another couple items on here to help us stay aligned are the thick black dashed line is the historic district boundary. So keeping things within that as intact for historical purposes as possible is critical, maintaining that. And a few other things that you'll see down the road, like the thick orange lines, are the alleyway corridors. An idea we had when looking at this plan, we saw how there's alleyways that are still alleyways or have been filled in or blocked off or something that could be great connection points for walking around the square. So that's kind of where we started with this color map. And then that allowed us to hone in on those parcels that we think are good opportunities and what would be best fits for those. And so now Darren can come back up and talk about all of those pieces.
Thanks, Brett. So this next plan, you kind of get a glimpse of what's going to happen. The next drawing will show up there, but this is the master plan kind of put in a layer right behind this stoplight plan, so you can kind of then get a little bit better of an idea of where you might be downtown. People have a hard time reading maps usually, but you can see where the red, the yellow, and the green areas are, and what you really do notice is how much of an asset Nolan Road is, and where things really, that's where the easiest land to try to redevelop early could be. It's where county or the city owns property along those pieces. So you'll see a real attempt in this master plan to green the city, to add a lot more development at Nolan on both sides of the road. And then the farther we progress to the west, we have a little less of the green development areas, but still trying to take care of that part of the downtown as much as possible. And then just doing adaptive reuse or some of those cut-throughs in the historic study zone that we're looking at. So then if we move to the master plan part of it, again, if we start to the right side on Nolan Road, the largest chunk that we have that's the easy piece, and I'll try to see if I can get this cursor to work. It's really not going to work. So between Lynn and Lexington and then Nolan and then up on Truman, that's a big piece where the city hall, where we currently are tonight, the police department's in there, and then there's another building that I believe is another city building in that block. that'd be pretty easy to parcel off. What we're looking at there is having that's where maybe the community center could go. We're calling that the civic center part of the site, really the new heartbeat maybe of the downtown. We're not trying to take away the importance of the Truman Courthouse Square, but this new civic center could be more of an entertainment zone, a moneymaker, bringing in maybe a museum to that part, a food court, or even a food grocery store marketplace going there, housing, the community center. There'd be a lot of underground parking in this with the way the topography works, so we can slide a lot of cars and build mainly a kind of a big plinth, a big flat spot. There's a lot of grade down that street that everybody knows, a little challenging to get down there. So if we can really start kind of at Lynn and kind of keep that a lot flatter and tuck things underneath, and then take advantage of the community center being tall so it can pop up in that zone, maybe we created a very big, nice open space that can be used for concerts, festivals, just great open space in the downtown that we really don't have here other than parking lots. It'd be kind of nice to have some flexible space. Maybe there's a little amphitheater in there so we can get those kind of functions going. But really create this really nice block, and it's a large piece. I think that's about an 8 or 10 acre piece. So a pretty good chunk, pretty good discovery there. And then that ties in with Hiram Young Park below. Oops, I think I went forward. Where we're kind of going to extend the park a little bit more down towards Walnut, take advantage of that so we can really grasp this big green space that you already have along Nolan there. Going up on Truman, the Sherman Community Center is up there right now. A lot of that use could go into the community center, those things with theater, just those events. So that looks to be a pretty prime piece to add more housing downtown here, and let developers kind of determine what that might be, but more of a mix kind of a thing going from single family. Usually there's a place where you go from single family to multifamily. We kind of have this missing middle kind of housing. So maybe that's a different kind of housing that lets other kind of people money or their money challenges or whatever fit in those slots. And then even on the south of that, we kind of went outside of our original study area along those tracks to push more housing in on that side. So really trying to create a pretty good sizable developable piece there for housing on east of Nolan. And then as we'll have some other exhibits as we go on, but Brett talked about the housing piece on Osage and Walnut. That down there is basically a big parking lot now, so maybe that could be a nice multifamily piece there, sizable, tall, with some nice amenities there. And just to the left of that, that parking lot in there, we still would use the courthouse kind of shared parking idea in that zone, but maybe that might be an optional place to put a grocery store or some mixed use where they're sharing that parking lot with the courthouse, and then off hours that could also be used for other kind of events down, to help parking for events in the city. If we go north of that development on Kansas and Osage, mixed use in there, we think that looks like a good spot for that kind of a thing. You'll also see between that multifamily area and going up to the north, all the way pretty much to Truman, having one of those alleys, those cut-throughs. So as the properties redevelop themselves and things happen, trying to keep those corridors open in that design so we can really push pedestrians and people up through those areas. Down to the southeast on Kansas, and then where Lynn and Maine and then Noland are, there's some nice housing in there, and we think we can do some more infill housing in those areas. Again, keeping with the flavor of the housing that's there, so not necessarily multifamily, but maybe townhomes, brownstones, those kind of things, keeping that variety going. I keep touching the scoreboard here. But kind of keeping that alive, adding more, trying to get more density, more housing down here for folks that is going to set up bringing more of this mixed use, readaptive use that we see. And then along Lexington Avenue, just south of that new civic block on Lynn, in between Lynn and then Memorial, use adaptive reuse along that street. Maybe there's some housing that are on the upper floors of that, but make that, maybe that's more commercial down on the street and take advantage of the buildings that are currently there. And then one last piece before I jump into the next part of this would be up on Truman and Liberty, between Liberty and Maine, where the Board of Elections currently is located, possibly putting, again, that could, be developer-driven. Maybe that's some grocery store with some mixed use, or maybe it's a hotel, those kind of things that could go up along Truman as the market would dictate that piece. And then we'll kind of go through what we really like to do. And I guess I'll just say one thing before we go too much farther, so there's not a lot of worry or anything. These are long plans. This is a broad, big idea, kind of a look at the whole. So we're not coming in here and saying all these properties are going to start getting torn down and all these things are happening. Where the green was, those are a little easier to try to get that land organized and acquire those things. But there's a lot of areas that are going to have to be, they're in the future. They're as developers, as there's need for that, or as property owners decide they want to change what they're doing and make their property a little bit different. So there's no suggestion that we're coming here with a bulldozer and it's fast or whatever. We do get into that conversation a lot. It's kind of a scary thing for us when we're doing these plans where we know there's people has invested a lot of money in these properties or might live there, and we're very cognizant of those pieces. On this identity part, we are seeing this next part of the presentation is really how we would experience Independence downtown when we come here. So most people are going to come here by car. They're not going to just walk for wherever. So if they're coming here by car, you're already kind of doing some work here to try to come up with wayfinding signs, tagging them into historical things. You got a strong history in that boundary there, so signage for that, signage on the perimeters in the other places where you enter Independence downtown. But a variety of those things really to try to brand where we are, so people know I'm downtown, this is going to be great. Coming into all these things that I came to see, or maybe you're just driving down Nolan, didn't even know it was here, and going, I got to go in there now. There's something really cool as Nolan Road progresses. So from a car standpoint, doing a lot of those kind of identifiers. Then kind of blending cars and people together, the streetscaping throughout the district. We know there's already a plan in place around the square for that purpose. I think that's going to start construction sometime soon here. It's been ongoing. So we're also suggesting just an overall long-range plan for adding more trees, adding more green space, those kind of things in the downtown area to try to attract more things. So as you come in here by car and then you get out of your car and start walking around, is it a nice, beautiful place to walk? Are there trees? Are there potted plants? Is there places to eat along outside? We learned one thing during COVID. A lot of people have pushed their interior space to the outside. So everybody likes to we've rediscovered the outside. It never used to exist almost for I don't know how long. So people really enjoy those kind of things. You've seen during St. Callaghan where you have street parties, maybe close down some streets every once in a while. Maybe there's overhead lighting, just those kind of things. So you could really take advantage of your downtown and make it and create new events that don't even exist today to attract people down and have street parties or get people into that big civic area that we were talking about before. And then the other thing that we discovered that Brett alluded to a little bit earlier is when we really get down and you're just on the pedestrian level, people are used to walking along a street, but these alleys, we really see these all over. If you've been, our office at Olson Studio is in the Crossroads district of downtown Kansas City. It's happened very organically where people will take these alleys, they're adding their own potted plants, they're putting their own lights in there. When we have First Fridays, they're setting up events in there, they're getting a lot of vendors in there. letting people paint walls live during those events, which is really fun. But it's an organic kind of thing. But as a pedestrian and as a person that knows a little bit about downtown, it's just another point of discovery, another thing that makes it really fun to be here. Instagram, all the social media stuff, people like these kind of the cruftier kinds of sides. It's kind of impressive how we've attracted to the Crossroads teenagers all the way to, you know, people my age and older. Downtown and in that Crossroads area just all blend together. Really, really like it, even though it's, you know, got all kinds of graffiti and everything else. It's kind of become part of that fabric. So some of these corridors could be more historical than other ones. Some of them might be more arts oriented. Some of them we might attract some restaurants and those kind of foods to push that stuff. Lee Summit does that very well in their downtown, where they've taken advantage of all that alleyway information, putting decks out there and letting people eat and enjoy those kind of things. So again, kind of an organic thing, but it's really adds a whole nother layer and a whole nother flavor to the downtown. And then one thing we heard in our meetings that when we were going through the public was just more outdoor spaces, more things that are more humanized things. Some of these areas on our pictures, we try to find some of the best images we can kind of find. Some of these look a little oversized for what Independence is, but they'd be right scaled here. But the point is creating more outdoor space where we can. Sometimes there might be places on the streets where those look like sidewalks and you have pavers and those kind of things in the roadways, because that might become an open festival area at some point where you can close streets down. But really trying to inject some of these things to get people out, get people downtown, have some fun, experiencing more things at a pedestrian level. And greening of the city. We talked a little bit about that, how nice it already is. You have a park along Nolan, but expanding that out so we go all the way down to Walnut, all the way up to Truman, and then just, you know, maybe we can take advantage of that median that's in the middle of Nolan Road, where we can add some trees in the middle of the Nolan Road, but landscape the perimeters and the sides of that as well. So we really make that an important greenway in to really try to shuttle people into the downtown and get everybody excited about those places. We talked about that civic lawn, that civic space. This is we see that as being like a big synthetic turf kind of an area that, you know, won't get all run down and beat up, that you can use for just about anything. People could just relax, eat lunch there during the day, the people that work down here, or you're bringing people in at night or just something on the weekends to have fun. That area is just about as big as some of these parking lots you've been trying to hold some of these events in. So this now would have food, and it would have people living there, and it would have a museum and those kind of things. So really creating a tremendous space in there. There's a lot of topography down here. So some of these cut-throughs, we could have some really cool stairways, like on that Step Into History thing, where maybe those are great places to relax, kind of artistic as well. But just taking advantage and you know, celebrating some of these steep sites that are there to let people in. But really, it would be just a great thing to see if we had people just lounging around downtown on some of these things Saturday. I know everybody tries to do that. I know sometimes it seems far-fetched, but it doesn't take a whole lot. The more people you get down here, the more people feel safe, the more people keep coming. That's the ticket. So getting that housing down here and getting that sense of community. So we go into that community space, food, maker space, where if you don't know what that really means, but some of these buildings could be repurposed to take care of where you go there for arts and crafts. You could be teaching somebody how to cook. Maybe there's little restaurateurs that can't afford a restaurant, but they can kind of start off in these places and do those kind of things. We talked about the museum. There's a couple places where that could happen. The Frontier Museum up on Spring and Truman. That might be another possibility to kind of rehab that or adaptive reuse of that. But these other things where we have some of these alley cut-throughs, what we're really saying in the historical areas is not tearing that building down, but maybe it becomes an art gallery space that we can let people go through and walk through that gallery, and now they're in the backside going to something else on the site and dragging and kind of manipulating people's movements a little bit where we want them to try to discover other things. So there's a few of these gallery-type buildings, the old Jones store, and then across the street from that one, and then if we go down on, I think, what is that? I'm trying to think what name that street is up there, but coming in, we have three of those where really they were like old. One of them especially is an old road that they just kind of packed a building into. It looks like we cut through there. It's like it's right. Well, it's in between Lynn. Is that Lynn? I don't know if it is. Yeah, it's the other pink building up to the top left, up to the top right on where you're looking. That one is a good poke through space. So not tearing buildings down, but trying to create community art spaces in those places. And then getting people down here just to live. You know, that's going to be one of the big tickets as we go to try to get people shopping, people living. It's kind of a catch-22. What comes first, the housing or the business? Hopefully a little bit of both at the same time, and it just kind of builds as we go, or events to show people what's going on if we can get a few of these things done, but a variety of housing throughout the downtown. And then the presentation before us that I think the council, or that was being talked about by the chamber, people like to be entertained. You know, they don't just want to go out anymore and just go eat. They want something to be happening. They don't want to just shop. They want something that they can have almost little mini vacations when they come down here and spend a few hours. And hopefully you can keep them down here for longer than that. So that's a good reason to have more entertainment injected into these pieces. So maybe some more breweries. You've already got the farmers market. The event square, Truman, we're making a kind of a suggestion here in this plan that maybe even some of Truman can be adaptive reuse, where maybe some more uses could go in there. We already have a restaurant in there, but some other things, maybe part of the museum could go in there. Get people inside of that building. There's a lot of people like myself came down here once with my wife, and we kind of peeked at it, didn't know if we could go in there, what was going on. It's a great looking building, but we didn't know what we were supposed to do there, so we tried to find other things to do. So if there was a way to even get in there so everybody could go, wow, this is a great building. We know why it's here. We know the importance of it. Maybe some of that goes on. So maybe even put a little bit of entertainment inside of the courthouse, the Truman Courthouse. And then just the tourism that entertainment and everything else brings, the entertainment, the staying, all the places to capture people when they come down. That's the end goal, is tourism, entertainment, getting it busy. So I think we'll let Bill go next.
I just wanted to come back up and apologize. I left one of my good team members off of the introduction, Dan Pierce with Tesserae Architecture, and he's going to go through some other exciting visuals on what the master plan could look like.
Thank you, Bill. Good evening. He ran my joke. I was going to tell a joke about forgetting the most important part of the team because we're the hometown members, but anyways, I've already forgiven him. We're good. There's no hard feelings. For those that don't know, I'm Dan Pierce. I'm with Tesserae. Our building is literally just on the other side of City Hall here. You can hit a pitching wedge and hit our building. If I'm hitting, I'm probably hitting a driver, knowing my golf game. So I think Chief can attest to that back there. Thank you, Chief. So my job as Director of Visualization at Tesserae is to take information and data and plans, and we take that and we craft it into a story, something that's more easy to digest and understand. A lot of times when people are looking at plans or just flat drawings, it's difficult to understand. So that's where I start to bring things to life with 3D. That's really where I'm working. You will not catch me with a drafting table or trace paper. I am all digital, so I'm working in the 3D realm. And what you're seeing here is a photogrammetry model that we've created of the square. Photogrammetry, if you don't know what it is, I won't get into all the details. It's basically taking a bunch of drone photos and processing those into a 3D model. So there's about 2,500, 2,600 photos that we've taken, and we've stitched it all into this model that you see here. And I'm going to move to, do we have, okay, there we go. What you're seeing on this slide, and this is kind of an evolving thing, and we keep layering information on as we go. We're really just looking at the low-hanging fruit that Brett and Darren had talked about earlier when we were looking at the stoplight plans, the green areas. So I'm going to attempt to not advance slides here as I'm pointing with this. So what you're seeing, the very high level, what we're looking at to lower the screen to kind of orient you here, we're looking towards the north. You can see Nolan Road here, Main Street. I'll have all the main arteries labeled on here, but we'll start kind of at the lower corner here. You see at the corner of Walnut and Spring, and then the city lots at Osage, I'm sorry, what did I say, Walnut and Spring, and then Osage and Spring, the city lot and the county lot. I'm not going to go rehash everything that Darren has gone into. He's kind of hit all the high level things, but I just want you to get a better visual of where everything's at. The other two green pieces that we're looking up here, you have the Postal Service parking lots, and then this is the parking lot that is on the back side of the Jones Store building. I'm trying to think of there's the Sentinel Room and Marinello are kind of here on the corner. We've also looked at the Board of Elections building, the city parking lot here, and then the Faro Theater parking lot. And then as you move further to the east, City Hall is here. This is we got Lynn Street that I don't have labeled on there, but the Dempsey Theater building, and then I believe the one next to that is a city-owned building. That lot, obviously with the news of the relocation of the police station, we're looking at this lot, and it's really opening up a tremendous opportunity for this corner at Nolan and Truman to become the gateway into the square. We think it's going to be a really dynamic way to kind of pronounce the arrival to the square. And as you move further east, we're looking at the Sermon Center, some of the parking lot in that area, and then even, we don't have it in our boundary here, but we're starting to look at some of the facilities buildings here that run along East Lexington. What we've started to do on the next slide is layer in some more information. And again, this is very high level. Do not get hung up on the design of anything. They're really just kind of placeholders right now, but just to give you more a sense of the scale of things and how it might relate to other pieces of the square. So again, I'll start at the bottom left. Darren had talked about the grocer. Maybe there's opportunity for multifamily. One thing that we are trying to keep in mind as we're looking at this, we don't want to, I don't know a better way to say it. We don't want to be Overland Park. We don't want to get crazy with scale. I think we want to be respectful of the scale that we've already established here in town. So, we're trying to maximize room counts with these, but we also want to maintain, respect the scale of everything. We want to respect the history and the tradition that has been long established here. If we look at the parking garage that we're showing here where the Postal Service is, maybe that's a potential to, and again, there's a lot of assumptions being made, but maybe there's a potential to have conversations with the post office, and might be an opportunity to go vertical with some parking to add some more parking for visitors. Maybe we carve out part of that for their fleet vehicles. To the right of that, we're looking at potential for a pocket park. Maybe there's a museum. We understand that the Three Trails Museum may need a new home outside of the Truman Memorial Building, so maybe there's a potential to put that there. Up here on Truman, again, where the Elections Board building was, we were showing a hotel and some parking right along Truman. And then kind of the more civic center that Darren had talked about, we have multifamily, we have the retail component, maybe there's a museum component, community center, and again, really putting those high traffic, high volume pieces at that intersection of Truman and Nolan, where you're drawing people into the space, you're announcing the the arrival. You know that you're here on the square. And again, you see some more lower density housing projects to the east where the Sermon Center is. And then if I go to the next slide, what we're showing here, Darren had talked a little bit about kind of the, it was the alleyway opportunities that we're looking at. And, you know, he mentioned, and I'll reiterate, we're not looking to knock down anything, especially that's inside of the historic boundaries. Best analogy I can think of is you think of the Faro Theater. I don't want to call it a pass-through, but if you're going in the front doors, you know how it connects all the way back to the parking lot. Maybe there's an opportunity. I think there was 3 that we've really kind of identified. There's one here that would connect to the farmer's market, one through the Jones Store building. Some ideas that have been tossed around have been kind of, if you guys have been to Parlor down in the Crossroads, kind of that food hall idea, maybe that's something that could occur inside the Jones Store building. Where's my other one? Where was that at? Oh, I think that's going through, I want to say that's close to the Gateway building. I don't know which, but if you think of it more as like a pass-through, so you're still maintaining the historical integrity and the fabric of the square, but we're finding ways to kind of weave everything together better and make it more, you know, maybe there's opportunities for some art installations or places for gathering, but really you're connecting the square in a better way. It makes it more manageable from foot, you know, for visitors, so they don't have to go around the entire block to get somewhere. You're creating those opportunities to navigate the square quicker. So that's what this image here is looking at. I think that might be my last slide. Yeah. I'm going to hand it back over to Brett here.
Thanks, Dan. All right, so jump back real quick. So as one thing we like to say to realign ourselves with reality, like they've alluded to, is everything we've shown, the plans we've created are wrong, right? It's not going to get built out exactly as we plan it. We use this as a visualization to what it could be, to spur ideas, to show developers and citizens what it could be, and entice people to develop here what the city wants to be developed, and get people excited for what it could become. And part of being able to execute on the visions like this is having a plan, actionable, executable steps. So that's what I'm going to talk about now. The first thing we did was a independent third-party study of the current conditions of the real estate market on the square, primarily focused in 4 sectors: retail, multifamily, office, and hospitality. A few of the key findings: the square has lower retail supply per capita than surrounding areas. There's been no multifamily construction on the square for over 20 years. The current office supply meets demand. And then there's no hotels on the square, part of the hospitality sector. But there could be upscale select service hotel for that based on the study. And all those key points we kind of already knew. The development in the square has been pretty stagnant for a long time. And so this is the basis that the whole purpose of this master plan is to move from this into something better. So the second leg of the stool, where the first leg is the master vision, is the master business plan. The key components of that is, number 1's a land control strategy. So the importance of land control for the city is to assemble parcels that are identified as good opportunities for developers, and then find developers and work with them to develop what the city wants in those pieces. That also shows a commitment to developers that the city is serious about developing the square, redeveloping the square, and willing to work with developers by spending money or going into development agreement to acquire land that they can hold for developers when the right one comes along. Part of it is the timeline, of course, from redevelopment plan adoption all the way through construction of new development, the goal. Another part of it to really kickstart that we're going to do is developer outreach. So once this plan is adopted, we would go on a roadshow pretty much to local developers that are experts in certain areas that we want to bring to the square and present to them everything we're showing here, but in its final form, and the other offerings that the Independence has to work with them to get them to come here. The third leg of the stool is the economic plan. A component of that is what Stifel's doing right now, which partly what they're going to talk about next, where determining Independence's current and projected bonding capacity, as well as other public financing tools that could be utilized. Developing the budget for the city, so city knows how much they have to spend and when, and making those decisions with all of the information in front of them. And then developing a public-private partnership strategy where utilizing existing tools such as the Missouri historic tax credits just got recently adopted. Those are for rehabilitating historic buildings that qualify. So that's something that could be used. Looking at other tools that could be adopted that could incentivize developers, such as like a zoning overlay district where we or the city says what they want in there, and if a developer aligns with that, then they can have more of a fast track process through the approvals and get to development, because what they care about is time and money. And so making it as easy as possible for them to come to the city and build what we want them to build is really the linchpin in making this work. So before we jump to the next one, recapping the three legs that we talked about: the master vision, what we want, the master business plan, which is how it can happen, and then the master economic plan, which is how it can be financed publicly and privately, so we can start building stuff as soon as possible. Are there any questions before we jump to the bonds that anyone wants to answer?
If I could just interject here, typically when we go about 90 minutes, we take about a 5-minute break. So if we could do that, if that's conducive for everyone here, let's take about a 5-minute break and we'll come right back and then talk about municipal capital financing, bonds 101. Thank you.
Thanks.
please proceed, and
Okay.
we'll move on with the rest of the presentation.
Sure, yes, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to reiterate the purpose of what we're doing here, and that really is to present, a vision, but just as importantly, an execution plan where I think when we interviewed, I said, I don't want to do studies, I want to build stuff. So from a developer's perspective, what matters to them is sort of having a clear glide path. So having a good plan, having land control, having some finance tools, incentive tools, having the will of the council and the staff to support easy access to opportunity is really what we're all about. So we want to, once we get this, we're not going to wait until the plan is formally adopted by council, but we'd like to start socializing the plan soon, immediately, and getting interest from the development community. So with that, Steve Nicholas will come in and provide an update on the bond strategy. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Mayor, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My name is Michael Short from Stiefel Nicholas. I'm here tonight with my colleague Mackenzie Steeklaw, and we are happy to be here and to share some information with you. Stiefel Nicholas is a national investment banking firm headquartered in St. Louis. We work in the Kansas City office. We're under contract with the city to work on the money part of this. You've heard about the vision, you've heard about ideas, and we are involved to eventually come up with a plan on how you might do all or part of that. Bill started out by referencing an analogy akin to being on the 50-yard line. For us on the financing part, we probably just got the ball, okay? So we're watching what is happening and how the plays progress, and I sort of compare us to the special teams coaches. We're now going to figure out how to do a couple of special things and get on where we need to be. So we're going to walk through the presentation. I'm figuring this out. There we go. All right. First of all, we're going to talk very generally about what is a municipal bond in simple terms. What is the bond issuance process? Then I'm going to talk a little bit about the City of Independence current credit profile, which is critical to any kind of financing plan. And then talk a little bit about potential funding options and some of the bigger, broader, overreaching goals and pictures here. But first, I'm going to ask Mackenzie to come up and talk to you about what is a municipal bond.
Yeah, thank you, Michael, and thank you, everyone, for having us. Very glad to be here tonight. So as Michael kind of alluded to, we're going to start pretty basic with what is a municipal bond and then kind of expand from there. So a municipal bond is a debt security issued by a state or local. Oh, there we go.
There you go.
Thank you, Michael.
Sure, thank you.
Is a debt security issued by a state or local government authority to finance capital projects, and it's funded by a loan made by investors who are kind of pooled together by an underwriter. For example, that would be Stiefel. You can kind of think of it as a mortgage loan where the bondholders are the creditors to whom principal and interest is due to. The revenue stream used to repay the investors or the bondholders determines the type of bond that it is, as I'll go over on this page. So general obligation bonds are going to be payable from an ad valorem tax on real property within the city. These taxes may be levied without limitation to the rate, and therefore they're an unlimited pledge, a full faith and credit of the city or whomever the issuer is. And the city can also support the debt payments with other sales tax revenues as well. But even if they are supported by other sales tax revenue, general obligation bonds will keep their unlimited pledge, full faith and credit of the city. Now, lease debt, also known as certificates of participation or revenue bonds, are supported by an operating levy or a specific revenue stream of the project. General obligation bonds will require voter approval of either 4/7 or 2/3, as I'll go over on the next slide in a little bit more detail. Whereas a lease debt or revenue bonds may not require voter approval if the bonds will be paid for from the current operating levy, so no increase in operating levy is needed, or if they're paid for from revenues of the proposed project or any other legally available funds of the city. So general obligation bonds will carry a higher credit rating and therefore lower interest rates because of their unlimited pledge, whereas lease debt or revenue bonds will carry a lower credit rating and slightly higher interest rates because they're a limited obligation of the city. General obligation bonds, they'll have a debt limit as a percent of assessed valuation of the city. So for Missouri cities, it's 10% for general purposes, another 10% for streets and sewers, and another 10% for water and electric, but the total aggregate cannot exceed 20% of the city's assessed valuation. Whereas lease debt or revenue bonds do not have a debt limit. General obligation bonds have a maximum maturity of 20 years, so they must be paid off within 20 years, whereas lease debt or revenue bonds can be paid off in 30 years or more. So this slide just kind of lays out the important election dates and voter approval required. So as I alluded to on the previous slide, if the city was considering an April 8th, 2025 election date, notice to the election authorities would be required by January 28th, 2025, and 4/7 approval would be required by voters. And something to note here, you see the approval required for odd number years, that kind of middle column in the top table. So for an April election, 4/7 is required, whereas all the other elections next year would require 2/3 voter approval. I'll just kind of briefly go over the entire bond issuance process from beginning to end. So it kind of starts with the state or local government has a capital project need and a dedicated source of payment to pay for that. From there, they'll engage the financing team, which again would be us at Stiefel. And along with the city, we would determine the financing plan and the schedule. And that is things like when would the city obtain, or if they would obtain a credit rating, when we would sell the bonds and things like that. So once the financing team determines the financing plan, an election may be required, as we discussed 2 slides ago. And if it's approved, the governing body would then approve the financing structure, which again, we would kind of be working on that with the city, in conjunction with the city along the way. That wouldn't be a surprise to you at that point. From there, the financing team prepares the necessary offering documents and markets the bonds to the potential buyers. And at that point, we will market the bonds, and the potential investors will purchase the bonds. And at that point, interest rates are set based on investor demand on that day. The city then approves the issuance of the bonds, and the bond documents are finalized and executed in preparation for the closing, when the bonds are then delivered to the purchasers or the investors, and the city receives their project funds. I kind of went over that slide pretty quickly, but from step 1 to 8 could take anywhere from several months to, in some cases, it takes several years. So there are 4 major players in the bond issuance transaction. So it starts with the issuer. So in this case, it would be you, the city. The underwriter, again, that's us at Stiefel. And we are responsible for selling the bonds to the bondholders. And in return, we receive proceeds from them. And on the closing date, we send the proceeds to the trustee. And the trustee is responsible for collecting the payment from the issuer and dispersing that to the bondholders. I'm going to turn it back over to Michael.
All right, thank you, Mackenzie. This is a very exciting subject, I know, and I can see it all in your faces. The essence of selling bonds is credit. I mean, investors want to know that they're going to get paid back what they loaned you with interest in the time period that you agree to pay them back. So it's just like any other credit transaction, you're involved as an individual. And what goes into considering that? The financial condition of the issuer. What do your books look like? What's your bank account look like? What's your history look like? Sources of repayment. Is this a new source of funding? Is this existing funding? And the gambit, it runs the whole gambit with jurisdictions about how they're going to pay them back. Cash flows and reserves. How much cushion does the jurisdiction have to absorb issues that occur or to absorb shortfalls in economic development projections, which I know you all have experienced in this city. So that's part of their analysis. Current and future borrowing needs. Is this phase 1 of a plan, or is this the whole thing? So are they looking at the whole thing, or there might be a possibility you're going to come back and borrow some additional money and leverage out your revenues further? Your current bonding and additional legal debt capacity. Mackenzie mentioned that. If you use general obligation bonds as an example, there are constitutional limits on that. about what the Constitution will allow you to do. And then finally, desire for local distribution of bonds. And this is an important thing for many cities, particularly cities like yours, who may contain people who are interested in buying these bonds, who are interested in investing in their city. And we work hard to structure the arrangement in the sale so that those individuals have an opportunity, in fact, a priority opportunity, to purchase bonds of the city in which they live. This is a very popular concept with school districts in particular, because people want to invest in their school districts, and so we work hard on that. All right, let's talk about the credit rating process and the credit rating chart. Here we've illustrated the charts that the three major credit rating agencies use: Moody's Investor Services, Standard & Poor's, and Fitch. There are 4 investment grade categories, and within the 3 lower ones, AA, A, and B or BAA, there will be subcategories. Now, if you're a AAA, you're a AAA. There's no AAA plus, AAA minus. If you're AAA credit, and there are real few AAA credits, then you're a AAA credit. And that's the gold standard for a lot of people to get to. A lot of jurisdictions, not very many do. The state of Missouri still is a AAA. The federal government on a given day might be, or not, but they are, because they can print all the money that we can give them. So excellent, upper medium, and lower medium. I've highlighted the A. That is where the City of Independence is right now. Based upon your last Standard & Poor's credit rating in 2001, in October and November of 2001, so coming up on 3 years ago, the city was rated A by Standard & Poor's. Not A plus, not A minus, A, right in the middle of the medium range. So a good rating for the city. If you drop down to non-investment grade, you're not selling those bonds, and it's tricky and it's tough. Okay, you're going to pay more than you can afford to pay for that. The independent credit rating agency will determine through an analysis process what your credit rating is. There's an application you fill out. There's data that you provide. That's what we do. We work very closely with jurisdictions in providing the audits, providing the budgets, providing the analysis to help their credit committees decide what your rating ought to be. There are some things that you can control. There are some things you can't control. 3 large criteria: demographics, income growth, and economy. A lot of your demographic statistics you don't really control. Now, you may put policies in place to try to grow the economy, and so you're doing some things there to impact it, but you don't really control it. And you certainly don't control the average and per capita income statistics for your citizens, other type of demographic data. It is what it is. Financial position, existing debt, the reserves that you have, and your operational health, your operational budgets. Do you budget in the black, and do you end in the black? Things like that they will look at. And then finally, management. They look closely at how the city governing body and the city staff manages the city. Do you have policies in place? You all do. One of the things we work closely with jurisdictions is looking at those policies: financial management policies, reserve policies, budget policies, fund balance policies, investment policies, economic development policies, all of these things that these credit rating agencies want to see. That's part of the good management methodology that they look at. They will then issue a written rating report. And that's what investors look to decide whether you have sufficient credit quality for them to buy your bond. And some investors are looking for maybe a credit quality that's not quite so high, because for them that means a higher yield. They're going to be able to get a higher yield on their investment. If you've got a AAA rated general obligation bond, you're getting a real low yield. But some investors are only going to buy those. And there's a market for almost everything. And ultimately, it's their analysis of whether or not you have an ability and a willingness to pay the debt. So they charge a fee. Nobody does anything for free. So the rating agency charges a fee to the jurisdiction based upon the size of the issue. They have a sliding scale. The more work they do, the larger the fee. General obligation bonds and smaller issuers have the lowest amount of fees. All right, now what I wanted to show you here was an excerpt from the Moody's Investor Services scorecard. Every one of these rating agencies has what we call methodologies. They publish those. They're out there if you know where to look for them. They are guidebooks for us. We go through those things and we work with jurisdictions to meet the criteria that are set forth in the methodologies. This particular one is an overview of Moody's U.S. City and Counties Scorecard. And one of the reasons I wanted to really point this out was to emphasize how large a percentage, at 30%, financial performance is in the scoring of any credit analysis for a jurisdiction. Financial performance is broken down into two categories: available fund balance ratio. How much money do you have vis-a-vis what your ongoing operational expenses are? They want to look at your reserve balances, and they always report it in terms of a percentage. If you're in the teens, it's not good. If you're in the 20s, it's better. Most of the time when I read these reports, if they're in the low 30s, they consider those robust fund balances. And that's our target with a jurisdiction, is to get you into a low 30% reserve ratio. So that's the first part of it. And then the other is liquidity. How fast can you get to that money? So they want to know that you can convert that quickly if you need to be able to do something with it. All right. Let's talk about the city's current ICR, which is Issuer Credit Rating. And that's the underlying rating that the city has, and everything is built off of that. The most recent report, as I indicated, rated the city as an A. And there were, in the report that was issued, they provided an overview, and we've taken text right out of the overview so that you can see it. And they summarize key assessments and indicators. Adequate economy at the time, with access to broad and diverse Kansas City metropolitan statistical area, but it's offset a little bit by weaker incomes in the city. Standard financial policies and practice under financial management assessment methodology, we talked about that, with an approved fund balance policy, which the city is falling short of, and they made a point of that. Uneven historical budgetary performance, which led to reserves being inadequate, or adequate but lower than similarly related credits, and then a very weak debt and contingent liability profile. That was a challenging time for the city. This financing was done through the MDFB, which is the Missouri Development Finance Board, for the Independence Event Center project. Some of you may have been around then, you know the story. You also had another financing that was done, the Cracker Barrel, or Cracker Creek, Cracker something, Cracker financing, and it had some trouble, and some of that has been refunded and redone and reworked. And so if you've been around a while, you know that there are some stories that I know management has been working hard to address and to turn around. Some of that happened because, like many other jurisdictions, you hit a bad spot. There was a rough spot in the economy for a while. You are not the only city that we talked to who had what we call a credit dip, okay? So it happened. And the credit rating agencies are recognizing that it's coming back and that people are, that things are better. And so we wanted to provide you with a couple of these excerpts. Now, to bring all this down to rubber, hitting the road, we got this great vision and stuff that we've started talking about tonight, but how do you really pay for it? I mean, what are you really going to do? So in very broad brush terms, we asked Zach and the staff some questions. And we were told that there's an estimated $250 million in public improvements that could be funded in this city, things that have not been done. A lot of it on the square that could be done, but stuff elsewhere that hasn't been done. Some have mentioned general obligation bonds as a funding option. And we mentioned there's a capacity limitation. But in reality, you all have about a $382 million capacity in this city to issue general obligation bonds. So I find it challenging to believe that you would exceed your capacity or bump up against that. Okay, so I think you have plenty of general obligation bond capacity if that's the route you go. But this is a big vision. This is a big dream. And in other similar sized cities that we represent and work with, there are always multiple components to the financing package. It is not a one size fits all type situation. You can fund these improvements and the bonds that support them with general obligation bonds. You can fund them with sales tax revenue bonds. You have options in a city like this, particularly a city like this that draws visitors and draws non-residents to pay sales tax. And that's very common in this metropolitan area. You have an advantage over school districts, for instance, which can only levy property taxes. And so that makes city financing at least different than school district financing or fire district financing or library district financing. They have limited sources of revenue. This type of a financing, I would estimate, would have a number of different components, including some developer financing components, some private placement components, some special district components, undoubtedly a general obligation bond component, and a sales tax component, because you're going to need all of that to do the things that I hear discussed and that people are talking about wanting to do. So as I mentioned, the planning team may be on the 50-yard line, but we're just getting started. So all of this has to be fine-tuned throughout the summer and the fall as you all look to where you're going next. But eventually what you expect from us is to come here one night and say, okay, here's what you want to build and what they say it's going to cost, and here's how we think you can do it. And so here are the things we suggest that you do to do it. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you all might have. I know that was kind of quick. We did attach a glossary of a whole bunch of terms. So normally during this presentation, we'd go through a lot of these terms. I spared you that, but they're attached in a glossary for your benefit. Okay? Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Anyone, any questions? Please proceed.
I don't really have questions. I have more statements.
Sure.
So you want those
Please,
now?
please proceed.
Okay. Having lived in Independence for most of my life, it can be a challenging place. The only thing people hate more than the way things are is change of any kind, which is a space of having to negotiate the idea that we actually could get better and deserve a city that serves us well. So there's a lot of work that has to be done by the public at large, as well as council members, for us to think about what could be. Certainly, trips that we've taken to communities who have made hard choices about how they finance, what they would like the amenities in their city to be, and have a long-term strategic plan with partners, Chamber of Commerce, their local banks, their funding agencies, developers, and obviously city government. Those places are successful. You look at Manhattan, Kansas, with their Flint Hills Discovery Center and their slow evolution of that space. It is fantastic. You look at Power and Light, which a lot of people say was a complete waste of money, a total overreach by the city, and that should never have been done. What a dynamic area. My kid comes home to visit me only to go to Power and Light. I'm like, fine. You look at Lee Summit. They have slowly and methodically rejuvenated their downtown. It's a lovely place to go for dinner and to go shop. Crossroads, the same thing. The recent trip we took to San Antonio, people with a vision. And it is easy to be so anchored by our immediate that we can never think of, plan for, or reach for things that are long-term plans. Many of us won't be here when this gets done, but it is our obligation to plant the tree that we will never see grow to fruition, because if nobody plants it, nothing grows. It is terrifying for some people to even have this conversation. There's so many what ifs. What if we do it wrong? What if we don't see the fulfillment of this entire project? we can continue to live in grandma's basement, or we can choose to have a place that our kids are going to want to live. So I see a lot of questions that still have to be answered, but you can see where this could go, and I just hope we have the courage to explore that in the ways that we need to. So thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else, other questions or comments, concerns?
Mr.
What?
Mayor.
Please proceed.
So I just want to say I appreciate the vision that has been expressed tonight. I am excited by that, and I wasn't bored by the financial side of it at all. That won't be a surprise to anybody. But I just want to say that, I really do appreciate the vision of what was shared tonight, and I think the most important thing that challenge that we have before us is sharing with our citizens and those that would choose to develop here and spend their resources here, is that we deserve this type of a vision in Independence. It's not so far-fetched that we can't reach out and grab it. And so I really am excited by this and really appreciate what's been shared and look forward to the next steps. And I hope those next steps come very soon. So.
Thank you, Councilmember. Anyone else? Other thoughts? Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you for taking the recess, because I absolutely forgot to bring down my Downtown Redevelopment Coordinating Committee report, which is kind of the beginning stages that we worked on back in 2017, 2018. This is actually another step forward, working on this plan and visualizing the plan that took over a year to develop through a coordinating committee that took, 15, 16, 17 reports that we accumulated over the years, digested them, went to different communities, looked what they were doing, looking at different areas of development, how can they work, and how does it fit into the City of Independence. After 12 months, they brought it and gave it to the City Council for review, for consideration, and this is one of the next action steps for the square. Even though it says Downtown Redevelopment Coordinating Committee report, it did take more of a bigger holistic look at some of the areas, mainly in the northwest side of Independence, and gave us a great blueprint on financial steps and economic development tools that we've implemented. As I review this every once in a while, we've knocked off quite a bit out of this with Inglewood, moving forward with Fairmont, the things we've done on the Independence Square. So this is just a great natural flow of what can take place. The visions that we are putting forward, they're not set in stone, but it does give us a good footprint. It's been great working with Bill and his team and getting to know them and their expertise to help us take the next step. It's exciting, it's scary, but it's something that we need to do as a community. If we're going to be competitive, if we're going to bring different types of redevelopment to our city, if we're going to look as our economic partnerships, our economic partner through the chamber, as they were discussing with us, that the nature of business, the nature of economy is changing. How do we adapt? How do we move forward with that? How do we tap into our historical significance, our history, our tourism, our athletic tourism? How do we move to make our general obligation to our citizens more complete through better streets, better parks, better infrastructure, but also stuff that they want to use and bring back to the city? So thank you for taking the time, working with us. This is a great next step. It took us 5 years to get here, so it's good to see it moving.
Well done. Anyone else?
Mr.
Please
Mayor,
proceed.
I just want to add, I get asked a lot, or you hear people talk a lot, and compare us to places like Blue Springs and Lee Summit and, Liberty, and why aren't we this, why aren't we that? We have something in Independence that no one else has, which is this amazing history that we're all so proud of. And one of the reasons that there is a difference is our community hasn't done a GO bond. And so it is scary, and I know what it's going to cost all of us is a question, and we're going to have to work on that and answer that question. But this is the kind of plan that's going to stop that conversation about why we're not this place or that place. So I'm excited about it. We can dream, we can aim high, and then we can work on it with the feedback of our constituents and working together with council and mayor and staff. Thanks.
Thank you. Well done. Anyone else? Okay, and I concur with my colleagues. What I hear from citizens is the word refresh for our city, and this is an opportunity for us to do that. So with that being said, Mr. City Manager, I'll turn it over to you if you'd like to have any closing comments.
Yeah, Mayor, thank you again. Thank you for the feedback of the council. It is an exciting night, and as Councilmember Perkins said, there have been many weeks, months, and years working to get here. Can't see it on TV, but seated in the back corner are many of the merchants and stakeholders from the square. A lot of credit goes to them for buying into this vision long before City Hall showed up and decided to throw our shoulder into this as well. So I'm looking forward, as Councilmember Fierce said, to bringing next steps to the council. That will involve wrapping up some of these feasibility studies that we've talked about, bringing forward a resolution of endorsement to adopt this redevelopment plan officially so that your master developer team can go out and begin to full-throated socialize this in the development community and start to build some excitement in the private sector while we do our work on these public sector improvements that are forthcoming. Thank you again for the opportunity to present tonight.
You bet. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Anyone else, other comments before we wrap? All right, we'll call this meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.